Guatemala. This time it's we have the nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because
to the 15th edition of Sunday Review for 2021. I'm your host, YaYa Marin Coleman. Thank you for joining us this morning. I don't have a co-host, and this is where we make sense of the news. Our guest this morning is our sister Ann Wade. Good morning, Ann.
Hi, good morning, YaYa. This is fantastic. It's great to be here, to be with you, and to be talking to Belize, people in Belize.
Yes,
Creme, this is wonderful.
Yes, yes.
Thank you for inviting me, by the way.
Your old kind stamping grounds.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. So we are on Creme Television, simulcasting on Creme Radio, and live streaming at Creme Television Facebook page. For the next hour and a half, we'll be talking with Ann Wade. On September 22nd, 1981, Ann did an interview with the then Prime Minister of Grenada, Brother Maurice Bishop. And a little over 2 years later, in October of 1983, he was assassinated. And so yesterday, Creme Radio aired that interview with Brother Maurice Bishop, as well as on Friday morning, it was aired for those who had an opportunity to listen. So I'll be talking with Ann based on the conversation she had with Brother Maurice Bishop almost 40 years ago, the relevance of that conversation still today. I wanted to speak with Ann in the first half hour so we could get to know who Ann Wade is, because I certainly didn't know who she is, even though I was familiar with her name. Ann, can you tell us a little bit about yourself in this first half hour? How were you raised? Where were you raised? What informed your consciousness to how you became a known media personality before 1981 when Belize got its independence?
Well, once again, thank you. It was really nice to be here. I'm surprised, but at the same time, I'm happy I have the opportunity to talk about Maurice Bishop and that interview. I think whenever I talk to my children, I always mention that particular interview and the independence celebrations of Belize in 1981 as the highlight of my professional career as a broadcaster in Belize. That particular interview, I tell my children all the time, was the one that I'm most proud of, because I never dreamt that I would have the opportunity to actually sit down and talk to somebody like him. And in the time when it was happening, it was a tremendous time for people of my age, younger people at that time, and younger Caribbean people. So that's about Maurice. But and I want to remind people, a lot of people don't remember that I did work at Creme. From time to time I meet somebody and they would say, yeah, your name sounds familiar. Then I say, I was on Creme just about 15 years ago or so, a little bit more than 15 years ago. Oh yeah, we remember now, Miss Ann, that kind of thing. But as a young person, I had moved away from Belize as a young person right out of high school, came to the United States, spent some time, went to school, and then I came back home in 1975. Got involved in media as the next thing to do because I felt I had an aptitude for it. I wanted to be a geologist, actually. I did that. That's what I went to school to. At my initial 2 years in college at Arizona State University, I was doing geology, and from a young girl, I always wanted to, because I was always interested in the earth. I love the wilderness. I love Belize because it's so beautiful and all so pristine and everything. So I've always wanted to be like a protector of the world, of the earth. Anyway, I came back to Belize in 1975. My father was sick, and I came home and stayed there until the intention being I was going to be there for the rest of his life because he was terminally ill. And he passed away a year later, and I ended up staying in Belize. Different interests, falling in love, and then connecting again with my family, and just feeling very comfortable there as opposed to back home, as opposed to the prior 3 years when I was in the U.S. And feeling that, listen, this is where I belong, and this is where I want to stay for the time being, or stay for good. And the next thing was, okay, now I have to earn a living while I'm in Belize. Where am I going? And there was an opening at the radio station, at Radio Belize at the time. There was only one media house at the time. Radio Belize was the. And there was an opening, it was advertised. And I felt, okay, maybe I could do this. I always liked information. I was a reader. I read everything I could get my hands on from I was a very young child, about 4 or 5 years old. I was reading the newspapers with my dad on Sunday morning, and read everything. By the time I was 13, 14, I was reading all kinds of stuff. So information was always very important to me. And so I applied. And obviously I had a good aptitude for it because they took me on almost immediately, and the rest is history. Radio Belize was a fantastic opportunity, and I had some, prior to my being there were some, and I remember always listening to these people, and like Cynthia Henry was the female before Gertrude Smith became the female. And they were the only two before I came into the radio station that I can remember. They probably did have, I can't remember her name, there was a bilingual announcer as well who was female, but the majority of the voices you would hear on the radio who would be reading the news and being, they didn't do quite as many outside broadcasts or remote broadcasts as we did once I was in there and at Creme Radio. But whenever they went out and did a remote, there was always a guy you heard. But I had an aptitude, I applied, I got in, and I was lucky that Gertrude Smith was still at the radio station. Cynthia Henry had already left. And Gertrude took me under her wing. I always tell everybody that and give her praises because she was a quintessential professional broadcast person, and she was kind enough to me as a younger person coming in and told me and really took me under her wing and nurtured me and gave me good lessons on how to be a good on-air person, and also you had to be dedicated, you work hard, that kind of thing, to shape where I was going, the trajectory of my relationship with media, because I think it's that initial grounding that Gertrude gave me at the radio station made me recognize that, yeah, this is good for me. I could do this at the same time, and I could do a hell of a lot with it. And I worked hard. I just worked hard like I saw her do. She would prepare. She had this woman's program. Aside from reading the news and all the other like music programs that she would do on the radio, she would do a children's program every day, children's longer program during the weekend. I think it was a Saturday morning, as well as a daily women's program that was a produced program. She showed me how to produce a program on tape, get all the pieces together and put a program together for an hour and a half, which involves cutting tape to edit programs. Today you have all the electronics that do it for you, but in those days I learned those skills from Gertrude, and just how dedicated she was and how hard she worked. I realized I could do this too, and I tried to emulate her, and I did, and that's how my career was built. It started, and went from there.
So this would have been about 1976?
75. I think I went to, no, I'm lying. I went to Belize 75. 78. 1978, I joined the radio station. And yeah, independence was three years later. And that set me up for this tremendous occurrence in my life. I had to witness the independence of Belize really close up.
And
And
do you remember
yeah.
how much you were being paid in 1975?
I'm trying to remember. It probably wasn't more than like 80. I don't know, maybe $87 or something. It was
A week?
It wasn't much. It was. I'm trying to remember. Can't remember too well, but it was some. A paltry little sum, but I can't remember exactly how much.
Good, but that's good enough because it's important that culturally in Belize, we tend to not talk about our salary publicly. And the reason why I'm asking this is because, and I'm happy that we're having the conversation this morning, is because we need to look back in our history to learn lessons that worked, what didn't work, and based on where we are in 2021, especially within the context of the union's standoff with the state, or the state standoff with the union. And we're looking collectively at, yesterday was International Workers' Day, at the amount of work people did over a period of time in Belize and how much they were paid. So we're talking about 1975, 76, you would be identified as a professional at the time, one of the first women media broadcasters, and respect to the sisters that you mentioned, the two sisters that you mentioned who were before you, Sister Gertrude Smith and Sister Cynthia Henry.
Cynthia Henry, yeah.
So respect to recognizing those sisters. And oftentimes we hear about the brothers, but we don't hear about the sisters. And these were black women, so that's very important for me as well. So you're at Radio Belize. You're one of the few broadcasters. So tell us how it is that you became the woman to interview Brother Maurice Bishop. How did that happen?
Everything just worked. The universe was working for me because I had only been to the radio station 3 years. Some senior people I met when I came into work there had left the radio station. Particularly Ernesto Vasquez, who was the program organizer, had left to go into the private sector. And Gertrude had left as well. And obviously the work I put in, and I had obviously some kind of aptitude for being this person, for leading a team. And so after 3 years, I was offered the chance to take the place of that was open when Ernesto Vasquez left. So there I was as the program organizer, who was the head of the broadcast team, and all the people on air at that time, who were at that point the men, and there were a couple of women out of the newsroom who did the Spanish, who would do Spanish news or news in Spanish. They would write the news in Spanish as well as come on the air and deliver the news in Spanish. So I was involved. That was my major duty at the time, and being head of that group. But as head of that group, the on-air group, I was intimately always every day on the air, producing programs. I had taken those programs Gertrude had left, and they just became mine, and did the news every day. So the universe worked well. 3 years later, there I was, Belize going into independence, saw some very interesting things leading up to, the months leading up to independence, was involved with the insurrection. You remember there was, just before independence, I was like a few months before independence, there was the uprising because of from those who were anti going into independence, and was at the radio station when the group that came into the radio station to take it over, or to turn it off, to take it over, I was responsible for the group who was there, my colleagues. I was their supervisor. And I was there at the radio station when they came into the radio station to close it down, and actually not to close it down, but to take it over. And they came into the studio and sat in the studio, but the radio station had already been turned off. I was the supervisor at the time, and I kind of told the technicians what to do and how to turn the radio station off. So it went off the air.
What
But
made
so
you,
I was,
what made you decide to
I was
turn it
witness,
off?
I was witness to that part of it, and that's a very interesting part. And I want to have a conversation about this at some point. I'm coming home about God willing and the universe willing. I will come home in about a year and a half, like just a little over a year. And I want to get together with people like Glenn Tillett and other people who are involved in that movement and the insurrection, the anti at the time, and try to get this all written up. I know Amandala would have a lot of the information, the historical information, because they were there witnessing it and reporting on it. But in any event, that was part of my experience at the radio station as a young journalist or as a young broadcast person. Learned a hell of a lot because of it, and learned what I was capable of in a time of crisis like that as well,
Let me ask you,
because I was leading the team.
The decision to turn this radio release off, was that an individual decision that you made, or were you instructed to turn it off?
No, it was a decision, because the decision to turn it off was made for one specific reason, for the security of the radio station. We were concerned that because the equipment in this, not only the studio but our what do you call it in the back? That they can't remember the term right now, but there was equipment in there that needed that made everything work, and we just wanted to protect the wholeness of it and not have any destruction happen. So rather than face the group of people who are really very upset and wanting to, we were feeling threatened at the time, and although we were workers, right? But we're the ones who were being put upon. We were in the building. There was a handful of us in the building, and being concerned for not only ourselves physically, but also the radio itself, we decided, listen, let's just close down, and if you want to go home, go home. My decision to the staff that was under me was, hey, listen, we need to not have you be here and be feeling or becoming entrapped in this, and any harm coming to you guys, or feeling, because there were a few people in the newsroom who were really, really scared, and a couple of women, so that the decision on the whole was that for the safety of the staff that was there, as well as the safety of the equipment, the radio station, and the integrity of it.
People who are listening to this for the first time and have no idea what you're talking about when you said there was a uprising or there was some tension with Belizeans who
there was a riot. Look at
going into independence, as well as
and Amanda would have all of this,
as well as the operational structure. So who did you respond? Who was your superior? How did who set the agenda? What was the political ideology of Radio Belize?
The political ideology, I don't know if that we did have a political ideology other than our bosses were the government and people of Belize. It was the Ministry of Home Affairs that was the PS in that ministry, who was our boss. And PS, you may not know who that was, what that is, but in the way government was structured at the time prior to independence and shortly after independence, or going forward for a few years after independence before they changed it to now they have the officers that are appointed by the parties. But the public service had permanent secretaries, and each ministry had a permanent secretary who was the boss of the particular ministry. And the radio station fell under the Ministry of Home Affairs. I can't remember his last name, but I remember his first name was Michael something or other. It's been a while, and I really haven't. I wish I'd taken some time to kind of, but I'm not in Belize. It's hard for me to do this now, to find all of this information to refresh my memory. So, but like I was saying, coming back to Maurice, I always considered that everything just worked. The universe worked for me, because that to me is the highlight for me as a young, and I was so young. I did this interview. I really pushed it from the moment he stepped off of that plane. I was talking to the people that came with him, his his group of men who were obviously his protectors. And there was one particular gentleman who and he identified himself as I'm the leader here. So I kept, whenever I saw him or whenever I saw the group, I would, come on, I need an interview with your prime minister. And it happened eventually, and I was grateful for it.
Before we go to break, I just want to get this piece in. We'll talk about how you did the research to be prepared for him. But what was your initial response when you saw him? Because he was a fine brother.
He was just the best looking person in the world. He stepped off. He came to our independence celebration in a smaller plane. He and all the men who came with him. And I remember the plane coming up. The Radio Belize group would go to the airport whenever a dignitary would come in. And we had a lot of them coming in for the independence celebrations. Practically every Caribbean prime minister was there, as well as Latin American leaders, and the radio was there to welcome them and do a live broadcast of their arrival, etc. And this person stepped off this little plane, and it was wonderful. Literally the tallest person you could imagine, really good looking and really much younger looking than one would have thought. And it was just fantastic to see him. And so as a result, talking to him later on after he finally said, okay, give her an interview, that kind of thing, which after we followed him around for 3 or 4 days, asking his people, will you come on, finally obviously making a decision now, we'll give her an interview because she's persistent. And nobody taught me to be persistent as a journalist, but I wanted to, at the time it was interviewing Maurice Bishop because of what had happened in the Caribbean and what he had done with his country. That was the biggest news out of the Caribbean at that time. And also that he had the time to come to Belize for the independence celebration. To me, was one of the highlights of our independence celebration.
Respect, we need to go to break. JC Arzu just shared with me that Pula Lightburn said the permanent secretary was Michael Holtz.
Thank you, Pulu. Thank you. I couldn't remember his last name, and I wrote his name down, Michael, but I couldn't remember the last. Michael Holtz.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Pulu. Okay, we'll take our first break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what you've been waiting for. In this corner, we have the masters of limitless power and unbeatable connections. Pioneers of 4G LTE in Belize. It's the undefeated champion, Smart. And in the other corner, struggling to keep up, it's the other guy. Fight! Tired of getting blow after blow from a plan with the other guys? It's time to tap out and join the winning postpaid plan provider. Smart's postpaid plans are a total knockout to the competition, and they have once again powered up their postpaid plans. Sign up for one of Smart's boosted postpaid power plans today and experience the victory of superior service. Smart, bringing people together.
In the heart of a thriving country, Atlantic Bank stands as more than just a financial institution. We are family and your steadfast partner in success throughout every step of your journey. Our unwavering focus remains on continually enhancing your experience through innovation. From the traditional banking services to cutting-edge online and mobile banking services, we make your life easy, convenient, and secure. We deeply value the relationships and trust placed in us over the years. This trust has enabled us to support and realize the dreams of our personal customers, be the driving force behind the development of micro, small, and medium businesses, and the preferred partner to our corporate clients. We are committed to serving our communities and making a positive impact. By prioritizing financial inclusion, We ensure that everyone has access to the financial tools and resources they need to thrive. We are your partner in progress, serving you with excellence and professionalism and providing real-life solutions. Today and for generations to come, let's continue building the future together.
Here's how to be a part of Benny's Homecation in 3 easy steps. First, download the B-Bucks app and sign up to be eligible. It's fast and easy. Then, shop at any Benny's location or Benny's entity. Remember to choose products from our monthly Homecation jackpot categories to earn entries. Now you can earn B-Bucks with purchases made and be a part of the Benny's Homecation jackpot for a chance to win the $10,000 grand prize in December. Win the ultimate Homecation with Benny's, quality and savings.
Segment of Sunday Review. I'm YaYa Marin Coleman. Our guest this morning is Ann Wade. For people of this generation, you may not know who Ann Wade is. Ann Wade worked for many years as a media broadcaster in Belize. And how many years do you believe you worked in media in Belize?
Well, I'd say but I could count it, 78 through 2003. But even when I went to work at the PUC, so we could count that, 78 to 2003. Help.
Well, me, I know, right away, I did the calculation, that 25 years.
Actually, 25, 26 years. But
yes.
Even when I left active media and went to work in a private, or it wasn't really semi-private, it was semi-governmental, the PUC. I worked there as their communications director. So still involved in media, still involved with the media in Belize. And so it's been up until 2011, I was a media personality. Professional. Media professional, I would say. I came here and continued along those lines, but communications. And but in a different sector.
Respect. So. We'll go ahead, and I didn't know I was going to do this, but thanks to JCR Zoo, I will. We'll go ahead and air that interview. It's just a little under 20 minutes that Ann did in 1981, September 22nd. Belize was just about 24 hours old in independence. She's interviewing then Prime Minister of Grenada, revolutionary brother, Maurice Bishop. Stay tuned, Belizeans. Listen, Crime Radio will air that now.
How does Grenada view an independent Belize?
Grenada is very happy to welcome independent Belize into the fold of sovereign nations. We believe that Belize is really very, very strategically placed to perform some critical functions on behalf of the Caribbean, and particularly the Commonwealth's Caribbean. Belize is, of course, already a member of the CARICOM, the Caribbean community. But it has advantages that most other CARICOM countries do not have, except possibly Guyana, which is also part of the mainland, in this case of Central America. It seems to us that given that ideal location, Belize can help in 2 critical ways. One is to bridge the gap between the different speaking countries in the region, French, Dutch, Spanish, English. In your case, of course, primarily Spanish and English, in a way that most of us cannot do. And secondly, it can also help by that very process to eliminate some of these artificial barriers which colonialism had imposed on the region. Because we believe very, very strongly that the only way in which the integration movement in the region will be built is through people-to-people movement, people-to-people contact. Only through people more and more getting to know each other and not having fears and suspicions and all of that. And therefore, the extent to which we can develop closer working relations with our Spanish-speaking and Dutch-speaking and French-speaking sisters and brothers, that is going to be extremely important. There's something else about Belizean independence that I want to mention that maybe the people of Belize do not quite reflect on. And that is this. Most people have independence put to them on a platter. You know, you send an envelope to the Queen in England, and she sends back down a constitution, and you have an independence. You set a date, you get a flag. Belize had to struggle for her independence. I think that's a very important advantage. Because when you fight and struggle for something, then you are going to treat it a lot more carefully. You are going to be a lot more concerned about ensuring its survival, its building, its consolidation. I think, therefore, that starting with that advantage, and particularly given the external threat which you face, that you do start off with an advantage that most of us could not have had. One of the essential pillars of ensuring that any process moves forward is definitely the need to be vigilant and the need to recognize the importance of being able to defend what one has fought for. I am sure, therefore, that the people of Belize will recognize this sacred obligation and prepare themselves, if necessary, to be able to defend their process.
You speak of Belize being at an advantage at this stage, having gone into independence the way it has. Yet some people might say that we are at a disadvantage, seeing the dispute with Guatemala has been settled, and there has been rumblings that the Guatemalan government isn't very happy about our independence. What part would Grenada play in, let's say, in some future time, if this happens, that Guatemala actively threaten us militarily?
Well, first of all, Grenada obviously will continue to give its full moral solidarity to the people of Belize. That is something that we have always done. And that is an unbreakable commitment we can make for the future. Moral solidarity is always important. The weight of regional, international public opinion is always decisive. That's one of the reasons, in fact, you are independent today, because you were able to receive so much support over the years. But Grenada will be prepared, in fact, to go beyond moral solidarity to material solidarity within our capacity and within our means, in a situation where some kind of regional presence or regional assistance is required in that kind of situation. I do not think it is proper for us to speculate on that too much, but I can say without any fear of contradiction that in a situation where we were requested to give any kind of assistance, that assistance would in fact, within our capabilities, be forthcoming.
Do you feel that Belize should be seeking to be a part of the various international organizations that we are now looking forward to joining, like the Commonwealth of Nations, the Non-Aligned Movement, the UN? Do you think that those organizations can actually play a big part in not only our development economically, but otherwise?
Yes, very definitely. I have no doubt at all it is in your absolute interest, unqualified interest, to join the United Nations. That is, of course, the leading forum in the world. To join the Non-Aligned Movement, being an organization of progressive countries that believe in the principles of anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, anti-neocolonialism, anti-fascism. I think that the Non-Aligned Movement is a critical organization for you to join. We ourselves are members. In fact, we are members of the Bureau or the executive of the Non-Aligned Movement. And I think it is a very, very important organization for you to try to get into. The Commonwealth is a fairly obvious choice. You are naturally within the Commonwealth, having regard to the colonial traditions of Belize, like, of course, the colonial traditions of Grenada. And therefore, I think joining the Commonwealth would also be important to you. The Commonwealth is much more of a club, but even so, it's important. You get the opportunity in an informal way of meeting with other leaders, of holding discussions in a relatively informal session. And there are certain obvious advantages. Of course, on this particular occasion, it also means that given the fortuitous date that your independence has come at, that Prime Minister Price will be able to attend his first Commonwealth meeting in Melbourne, Australia, if he so chooses. And that, I'm sure, will be very important to Belize. Likewise, the the Organization of American States, which I think you mentioned, but if you didn't, Prime Minister Price certainly has mentioned. I am sure again it would be important for Belize to be a member of that organization, because that is one of the, it is in fact the main regional organization. Being a member of the OAS will certainly give Belize the opportunity of operating in an organized way, of developing in an organized way relations with all the other member states of the OAS. Belize too, I think, will bring an important new balance to the OAS in terms of the present balance of forces in there, in terms of the potential for getting some important measures and actions undertaken. Just to give some rough examples, the question of the Caribbean Sea being declared and recognized as a zone of peace, something that Grenada fervently believes in, something that Grenada fought for at the La Paz Bolivia Conference in 1979, and in fact eventually got passed unanimously. We think that is a critical question. It will mean, for example, there will be no introduction of military maneuvers, of nuclear weapons, that foreign military bases that are being maintained without the consent of the people, that all of these things would no longer be permitted. And we believe that Belize can play an important role in questions like these. On the economic front, this mini-Marshall question is being discussed right now. We are certain that the perspective of Belize would be important in this area again. And speaking as an independent nation always, of course, gives extra weight to whatever views one has. So my very, very firm view is that it's very important to get into as many of these organizations as possible, that it does help your country, not only economically, but politically and socially. And it would be an extremely important step forward for Belize were she able to get into all of them. What we can say to the people of Belize is that Grenada will certainly give our fullest support to every single application you make in any organization to which we belong. We will fight very hard to make sure that you do get in.
We've only just become independent over the past day, one day. We've been independent now for an entire day. Perhaps you could speak to us about an independent nation, for example. Would you tell us something of an independent Grenada as opposed to before independence?
Independence does bring with it certain responsibilities, certain duties, certain obligations. What is very clear, and this I can say with the utmost confidence, is that the workload of your leadership in government and of your people generally will certainly be tripled as a result of independence. You can no longer afford to look to any godfather, for example, as in the colonial days. Not that those godfathers necessarily helped very much. The experience of pretty much all of us coming out of colonialism has been that the colonial power has not really done anything or not done very much for our countries. On the contrary, the whole function of colonialism was to exploit, to take out our raw materials, and also to use us as a base to expand their own markets. And this was very, very well done by the British colonial power. But I think that what you need to recognize is that the way forward would certainly center around being faithful to certain principles. I do not wish at all to speak for Belize or to make any suggestions or to pretend that I can give advice or any such thing. Some people yesterday were even warning you. I certainly don't feel I have come here to warn or to advise or to lecture. We have come here to celebrate with you and to learn. But what I can tell you is that the experience of Grenada has been that we have three main pillars that we rely on. The first pillar is to keep our people organized and mobilized, to raise their consciousness, to build their unity. This we try to do. We try to keep our people involved in the process. We try to get them to participate. We try to develop with them from the bottom up new organs of popular democracy out of which they can function. The second pillar is to try to build the economy, put it on a secure foundation, try to get it more and more self-sufficient, try to build it in such a way that it can more and more disengage from the clutches of imperialism, This we try to do because this is the only way in which benefits will come to the poor and working masses who have never had anything, whether it's electricity, whether it is pipe-borne water, whether it is inside toilets. They've never had anything. And, independence should mean that their day has come. And the third area is the need to be vigilant, the need to ensure that the country has a capacity to defend itself. In Grenada, we are very, very strong on that. So outside of the regular armed forces in terms of the army and the police and that sort of thing, we also have a people's militia. And that we build because we believe that no revolution can call itself that if it does not have the capacity to defend itself. So these are our three pillars, and I can only mention what we try to do in Grenada. And really, I think you'll have to learn out of your own experience what is most appropriate for Belize.
But seeing that you are independent, you've had your experience for some time now of being independent, doing your own thing. What do you feel would be the greatest threat to having Belize's independence not be, the word is not really successful, but not working out as for the general good of the people?
Right. Well, in the specific circumstances of Belize, obviously, the obvious answer would seem to be the question of external aggression that posed by Guatemala. Because presumably next month or next year, Guatemala could seek to militarily intervene in your country. That must be a major threat. One does not know what the present situation is with regard to the British government and how long their own troops should remain. That again would be a very critical question. And the question of what structures are built in the meantime, so that whenever the day comes that the British in fact depart, what possibilities are then open to the government and people of Belize to defend themselves. All of these are very critical questions linked to that first question. But leaving aside the general security question and the question of the external aggression, I would say in a broad way that the thing perhaps most of all you need to be conscious of is the economy. The economy, I think, is a danger zone. We have found that in the present situation of the world crisis, the crisis in the advanced capitalist countries, that primary producing countries, countries like ours that produce agricultural products, are in particular danger. Three of our major foreign exchange earners, for example, cocoa, nutmegs, and bananas, are all in very, very severe crisis. Two reasons. One is the fall in production. The fall in production has to do primarily with the question of hurricanes and natural disasters. We have had in the short period of 2.5 years of the revolution, 5 major natural disasters hit us. The tailwinds of hurricanes or freak storms and, that kind of thing. It has done immense damage. Only 2 Fridays ago, a 10-minute wind blew in our country. Just for 10 minutes the wind was blowing. And that knocked down 20% of banana production. So you always have to watch the economy. On top of that, of course, the fall in prices is very much related to the unjust and inequitable international economic system, which we presently have to live under which every year the price of our goods go up, while the price of their goods, the price of the goods we buy from them go up, but the price of the goods that we sell them keeps falling. Like in 1979 in Grenada, we got $56 million for our nutmegs, cocoa, and bananas. That same year, 1979, we spent $117 million to bring in the manufactured goods. By 1980, we got $44 million, $12 million less for our nutmegs, cocoa, and bananas, but had to spend $18 million more for the goods we bought from them. We spent $135. So we moved from $61 million deficit to $91 million deficit through absolutely no fault of our own. That is one of the reasons, I think, too, why you will find Belize is going to have to, play a leading role in helping to fight for the new international economic order. Because really what we are is a trade union of the poor countries around the world. And facing these advanced capitalist countries over there that we have traditionally dealt with, we do need to be united and organized. So in broad terms, I think the question of the economy is, going to be the area after, security and external aggression that you are most going to have to look at over the next few months and years.
One question that perhaps will be a bit sticky, but I think I better ask it. Grenada has a socialist government, and in this part of the world, the Western Hemisphere with the great influence of the U.S. Any government that's different from what they would call a democracy is viewed with a lot of suspicion. And how do you find that you're dealing with that? And do you feel that the suspicion is justified?
Well, obviously, every country must have a right to build its own process. Grenada is very, very firmly of the view that part of the meaning of our being non-aligned is that we have a right to choose our own process, to build it in our own way, that we have a right to choose our own friends, that we have a right to diversify markets, that we have a right to talk to everybody. Part of non-alignment to us means that our country must take a firm principled position on the question of what rights and responsibilities our country has. So we have rejected in the past publicly Carter's description of the region as a backyard. We today continue to reject Reagan's description of the country as a front yard of the United States. We are not in anybody's front or backyard. We are in our own yard, and we are building our own country, and that we will continue to do. That is one kind of thing. The second thing is this whole question of who our friends must be. This particular United States administration believes it has a right to tell not just poor developing countries like ours, but even the advanced developed world, their own friends in Europe, for example, what they must do. You would have noted that they are trying to dictate European foreign policy for the Europeans. They are trying to tell the Western European governments who must be in their cabinet, who their ministers must be. They are trying to tell the Western European governments what they must do with their money. Significantly last year, when the EEC countries, for example, tried to send humanitarian assistance through the Red Cross to the war victims in El Salvador, the Americans tried to block that. Now, it's that kind of paranoid administration you are dealing with in the world today. And therefore, small countries like ours, poor developing countries, must expect that we are going to be viewed as what they call enemies. We're going to be labeled international terrorists. They will try to apply their concept of linkage. They will try to bring all sorts of pressures to bear on us. Our answer in Grenada is to rely on the three pillars I was telling you about, to keep our people informed, to continue to mobilize and organize them, to keep their unity together, to raise their consciousness on a daily basis. That's one. To do what we can to disengage our economy from the stranglehold of their economies. And thirdly, to ensure that we have the capacity to defend our revolution. That is our approach to the question. Thank you very much.
Respect. For those who may just be joining us, you just listened to an interview done by our guest today, Ann Wade, with then Prime Minister of Grenada, revolutionary brother Maurice Bishop, who was assassinated a little over 2 years later. And Ann, let me know before we go to break your thoughts and feelings listening to that interview almost 40 years later.
The end of it, all I'm feeling is, unfortunately, they didn't have the wherewithal to defend the revolution. The revolution was still young enough not to have been able to be not to be able to defend itself, and he was killed. I could clearly remember when it was on the news, when it came to us, BBC. That's where we got our major international news at the radio station, that he was assassinated. When we were all stunned. It was only a couple of years plus 1 month after the independence of Belize when he was there, when I spoke to him. Unfortunate, because an era died of tremendous hope and future possibilities for Caribbean people.
I never tell you cry, Anne?
Beg pardon?
I never tell you cry.
Well, I think not only we at the radio station, a couple of the guys cried too. Well, we did, yeah.
Yes. Let us go ahead and take our second break of the morning, and then this last half hour have to be hit him hard, which Anne is used to doing, we can tell, to reflect on almost 40 years later the content of that interview, and that in 2021 we have a major standoff with the unions holding the state accountable for good governance, and the way Brother Maurice said it in that interview in particular, Anne, about nations that are becoming independent nations being a sort of trade union of countries, and again the sticking point being the economic system. So we'll take our second break of the morning and then we return.
Tired of replacing light bulbs? LEDs are what you need. LEDs last up to 30,000 hours. That's 30 times longer than incandescent bulbs, and up to 8 times longer than compact fluorescents. So less changing and less trash. Planet Earth thanks you. And the LED experts at Brothers Habet and Habet will help you find the best LED solution with colors for every room and mood, starting as low as $6.95. You can even get LED strips for home, office, and industrial use. So say goodbye to fluorescent tubes forever. And because they use up to 90% less energy,
Why is that interview still relevant?
I think it's still extremely relevant because it takes you back to what must be an important aspect of the development for Belize as we go forward. Our economy is the most important aspect of it, and what drives your economy is the people who work your economy. And the most important aspect of any individual in our country is what they have, their ability to work, and how we regard our workers who produce and make our economy what it is, one way or the other. Important, he stressed that was one of the most important things that a young Belize or a newly independent Belize needed to be extremely mindful of, to ensure that your economy is built on and in a way that will sustain and that will see us go forward as a country and develop our potential. It's so many years later, and we're having the crisis right now, a serious crisis. And unfortunately, I, without being home and being extremely intimate with all the aspects of the present crisis, I recall certain things that were happening at the time of our independence and just afterwards that gave us a lot of hope that we were going in the right direction. Unionism was strong and independent at that time. I get the sense, but from what you read on social media and in other places, that it's so political right now in terms of unionism, or certain aspects of at least that's what you get, that sense, or at least that's one of the criticism that's levied on the present day union leadership. However, I could remember at that time of independence, we had a very strong union movement, probably because we were coming from a strong union movement that created the political process in Belize. But and at the time, there was an entity called the United General Workers Union, with people and the building or the formulation of a young, not young, but certainly the reorganization of the citrus industry and the sugar industry. What has happened to those industries over time from independence until now? In that, I'm not sure about citrus so much, but certainly sugar has pretty much, although it's still one of the pillars of our economy, one gets a sense that is a lot less vital in terms of its performance, and the need to diversify away from our traditional just hasn't really happened. So there is that aspect of looking at the economy, planning forward, and making sure that we put in place those things that will sustain the economy and will grow it. We've gone from a production-based economy to a service economy, and unfortunately for that, but very strong industries like sugar and citrus and perhaps banana, I'm not too sure, not as strong and not as vital as they used to be when guys like Pablo Lambe and there was a gentleman from Africa who was a part of the UGWU called Mishek Mawima. They were very involved in making sure workers' rights were an integral part of the economical process. And other figures like from out of Orange Walk, Eddie Salas and Domingo Perez, who fought hard to organize and make the sugar industry stronger in terms of how the people who actually produce and made those industries strong are integral to the decision making in those industries. So it is sad, unfortunately. I haven't really developed a strong opinion one way or the other on what's right and what's not right at this point in terms of what's happening and the turmoil and the fight that now exists between government and the unions. But certainly from an outsider or sitting from the outside, I know that there has to be some aspect of serious creativity applied on the part of leadership on the governmental level, as well as in the unions. And I'm hoping for the best, that somehow or other we'll be able to come out of this without having a scorched situation where rather than rather than saving a situation, we actually create more damage. Because the route after this, or at least that's what I'm reading, that if government does not do something, become in terms of cut spending, then the next thing is to devalue and go into that crisis. But just hoping for some strength, creativity in leadership on both sides, and the ability to put the country first and the people of Belize, the workers of Belize first. Whether we lost a lot of that, I think, over time, where I felt that way as well, where it became so political that from government to government, people are disenfranchised. That is completely wrong. I don't care, and you know, whatever government gets in, our people. But thinking in the past, I'd say 20 years, 25 years, certainly shortly right after independence, this trend has developed where our different governments see themselves as the government of their supporters who put them in power, rather than a government of Belize and the people of Belize. And that's my major sticking point and my major irk for the political process in Belize, in that we've lost our leadership has not kept their bargain with the people of Belize, where as leaders you are leading all Belizeans and not your political supporters one way or the, you know, on from side to side and flip-flopping. And so that's my major irk. And at the time right now, I'm hoping for the best without really being on the ground and being really intimate with what is happening right now to try to fix a situation that a new government met after 13 years of a prior government. So.
Excellent feedback, and you made the point about the connection between political parties and unions. And one of the things, this interview with yourself, and then yesterday we also aired, being International Workers' Day, an interview with a sister, Elfrida Reyes, that was done in 1991. She transitioned, or died in 1992. She was born in 1900. So that interview is about an hour long. We aired it yesterday, and it was very insightful for a black woman, a dark-skinned black woman, and that matters in the context of the conversation, giving her insight as a person who has worked within the unions before Belize became independent. And it's a perspective and an insight that we often don't hear publicly. And a part of, we call it colonizing the archives, because I had to go in the archives and get the interview, and then reflecting back on it and where we are now, is that traditionally in Belize, the system, the government has never genuinely been about the forward movement of people. So when you look at the years of uprising from enslaved people, and you coming all the way before the nationalist movement to understand how is it that we ended up where we are, you have, for example, in it says from 1932 to July 1933, they're talking about one of Frida Reyes' husband, Solomon, was involved in a group calling itself the Jobless Workers. So workers were consistently organized and pushing back. In 1894, there was a laborers' riots when there was a conversation about devaluing the money. And so there were two things happening at all times. There was a class issue, meaning the everyday blue-collar worker, everyday people, and then you have the middle and the upper class, and politics was very much involved. So this is not something within, like, since independence or within the nationalist movement in the 50s. This was before that, and it's for us to understand the connection between that, and then the people who are telling the stories that we consistently hear, and we buy into that single narrative, which is dangerous. And so another thing I wanted to get input from you on is the level of Maurice Bishop's geopolitical knowledge, his clarity and his consciousness in 1981. And you look at Belize's political leadership class, I'm pressed to name one individual, just one, with that level of humility, confidence, knowledge, connection with people. I've spoken to other people who, from the 40s and 50s, and the one name that came up when you look at Belize's entire political leadership would be our brother Philip Golson. Why, Anne, do you feel that we don't have, because that has to do with leadership.
I feel that we did, you know, but not on a national scale like that. When I was this young person, young journalist in Belize, working on the radio and getting to know all of these personalities and preparing for the inevitable independence, you know, that whole process that brought us to independence, where the internationalization of the independence situation for Belize that actually got us enough support to enable us to go forward. I met a lot of individuals who, the local individuals, local individuals who would have been very comfortable sitting around a table discussing all of these matters and of the same mind and heart as a Maurice Bishop. There were individuals, and some of them still alive today, and all their perspective on life and future development of themselves and the Belizeans and Belize as an independent country fell along the lines of the importance of the individual and the citizenry, and how the responsibility that leadership has to empower them in all aspects. And I consider myself fortunate that I was able to, I got to know some of these individuals, and I was able to listen to their conversations and even participate in some of their conversations. Got to say there was a tremendous amount of hope at the time that we were on the right track, because these individuals existed in Belize who saw a way forward for us, which involved an integrating of the forces of our production, or the people who were making sure that people were empowered, making sure that people understood were given all the information necessary for them to make the choices that were needed for a young independent country. And for some reason or other, or I should say this is my personal opinion now, that as our political parties probably saw how the strength of these individuals who were involved in the union movement, and possibly regarded as future or present threats, that there was consciously developed a way to weaken unionism in Belize by co-opting certain leaders of the unions and getting them involved in whatever government is involved. You know, and we saw that over time, where certain union leaders became government functionaries at high levels. So you cut. This is my personal thing. You take the leadership out of a particular union and bring them into the fold here. Little by little, the strength of unionism was whittled away. Where today you have, yes, and I've been away for a little while, but even before I left, one got the sense that this was a conscious part of the political process to ensure that, yes, pay lip service to the union movement, but at the same time ensure that the union movement is not as strong as it should be by having leadership that is somehow compromised by one government or the other. That's my totally personal opinion, and it's unfortunate that, for me, my opinion is unfortunately for Belize, that promise that was there in 1981, where a strong union movement would be there as a counter to, and also as an assist to the political system or the governments of the day, to ensure that the development of the people is in tandem and by extension, the development of the country. To me, our economies have to play, or we need to be more creative, and we need to involve and everybody, include all aspects. And if your workers are not given the respect and the type of are not involved as they should be, all we're saying is not the true development of the country just did not happen over time. One got the sense that independence, we got independence, we were going forward, and independence happened, and there was kind of like almost a break, and everything became politics, and the focus then the focus was taken away from development of people, development of the country, where of true potential could be lived. So that all these years later, we're still grappling with these serious economic problems and still grappling with some serious social problems, and a larger population that needs so much more than the population back then. We were poorer then as a group overall, but we were a happier people, and we were, to me, we were also a more, there was more to us than every 4 years voting for a politician. And one get the sense today that such a large portion of our population just is so dependent, and also that is really what's important about such a large aspect of our population. That 4-year cycle of getting our representative back in government, or getting our minister voted back in government, it's almost it's sad. I'm sorry about it, but it's sad. And I love Belize. I'm going to be back there in a year and a half, hopefully before, and hopefully I'll be able to continue to contribute. Not sure to what extent. I'll probably become a farmer or something and grow my own food. But
definitely,
it's not the way that I thought it would happen. It would proceed.
To look back almost 40 years, it's a different set of people. The Belizeans of 40 years ago are not the Belizeans of 2021. The people who grew up in Belize in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, were people who had a different set of individual and communal values than the Belizeans of today. An elder was saying to me recently that we think nothing of, for example, a male peeing on the street. That's no biggie. But for Belizeans who grew up in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, impoverished
even the
people,
70s. No, but what that is true. But what I'm saying is a failure of leadership is to abandon all of those things that can help to keep a community strong and to keep a community growing in ways that are, growing, meaning growing positively. Leadership somehow that gave us some really strange examples of good of how to govern ourselves as an individual Belizean who is properly. So we love some of those values, but as more people, different people came into the mix to make our population what it is today, I think leadership could have helped us to continue to build on what was there and not abandon everything that enabled us to be a more cohesive and community and one that saw ourselves with more pride.
Based on where we are now, systematically, and we'll be playing Sister Elfrida Rest's interview. It's an hour long, but she was very clear that and she mentioned, because these are people that call names, and she's calling names, but she was clear that George Price had a different mindset when it came to developing the country, and not the mindset of the unions, and she named him as like the person who made sure that the General Workers Union didn't work. So oftentimes when we hear George Price's name, and
it's a good example.
And she would say specifically, so one of the things that was revealing to me in the interview with Elfrida Rice was I did not understand how serious the Guatemala issue was. And that she said, it was her interview and McPherson did it, she said that he hinted to her about being a courier, and she was absolutely, and she named people who were couriers. And so to hear somebody of that generation giving you their experience, so this is what a woman says she experienced, which is very different from the narrative that many of us have ever heard and really have bought into. And so even going into independence, having that pushback of Belizeans against the heads of agreement, it was really a Guatemalan issue and not so much the independence issue that a number of Belizeans were pushing back against. And for many of us, we don't even know that conversation.
You're right, and that has to happen. I think that the story has to be told because, yes, the anti-independence movement was mainly because we weren't unsure that we weren't ready. A lot of people, the people who were fighting against it, were saying we're not ready. We don't have a guarantee in place. Guatemala is a big bad guy sitting there. We need to feel more secure going into independence, and that is without a Guatemalan threat. It wasn't an anti-independence per se, just independence. It was because this great number of people in Belize felt that we just we didn't have enough of a guarantee that this country will not do us harm as an independent country.
And then to come around full circle now, having that case being presented to the ICJ, which is, when you understand that entire storyline and the part of politics of it, for me, I can only ask, who are these people? It's clear now that they never had any, I don't care what their lips say. I'm talking about what they have done systematically, and because of not meaningfully engaging Belizeans to be aware, to organize, to unify, that was not done. And in the absence of that, an ignorant population, then those in political leadership have been successful in ensuring that they have benefited, that their families have benefited, which is the pushback from the unions right now to say, stop. In 40 years, there's been no accounting of the public purse, and we do not intend for this to continue. And so then, because you have a large segment of your population not being aware, not understanding, then we are the people who continue to vote for these leaders who consistently are not investing in the people for our lives to be better. We'll have to wrap, but your thoughts on what I shared and the conversation we're having at?
Very, 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 there's a lot of agreement in so many ways. It's what has happened to us over time, from my personal opinion, is a huge failure of leadership. And I'm talking about leadership, local leadership. Independence was a great promise for us. We had great promise. People, I think, who did not fight against it quite as hard as that group of people who saw independence as an opportunity. We probably are, we're disappointed that our local leaders, our leaders who took the helm completely after independence, failed the people of Belize and the promise of that independence, because we see today an economy that is in shambles. Granted, a few COVID did not help, but the economy is in shambles based on the prior how many years of independence and all the failures of the governments of the past 40 years or so. You say 47? Yeah. Yeah, we failed ourselves as a people, and we have to admit that and give. Hopefully, there are the forces out there that will contribute to pulling us out of the really bad situation we're in right now economically. But one can only hope and keep our fingers crossed that those people involved right now in trying to figure out the way forward will will be blessed with will be blessed to be able to come to decisions and to come to some agreements that will be for the benefit of all and the best decisions for Belize, and that our political leadership will at some point do some good soul searching and deciding how to become better leaders of the people of Belize, because we deserve so much more. Belize has so much potential, and our people deserve more, and we haven't really gotten quite what we deserved as an independent country.
Well, you know, potential is untapped energy, so it's just sitting there not being used. Some potential that done nothing for you right now. And then the history of the political leadership in the past 40 years has failed. So there's no reason to think, even in listening to the conversation with the unions who are very clear, this mindset created these problems. So we cannot expect that same mindset to come up with the solutions. And this particular political leadership is demonstrating that they still have that mindset, for example, when they choose not to sit down and continue negotiations, because we know from personal relationships how important healthy communication is. So the minute...
Well, we know something has to give, you know, and something has to give. If it's a dynamic process, I imagine that, in a process of negotiation, or where you have two sides with very strong or completely different opinions, or where they are, and you're looking at finding a solution, then no solutions will be found. So I'm hopeful that if you're not negotiating now, maybe 2 days from now, or next week, that somewhere or other the better minds will prevail, and at the end of the day, that's all we have right now.
And it's for us as Belizeans to understand that we're not spectators.
Everybody will do the right thing.
We're not spectators. As Belizeans,
become a part of it.
It's our lives. It's like right now, and how much this is impacting our lives, the lives of our children. So it's our responsibility now to be honest with ourselves about what has happened politically in the past and how it has influenced our lives. And what is it that we want to be better for ourselves, for our individual selves, for our families, for our neighbors, for people in Belize overall today, tomorrow, and for our unborn children, to do something different, to engage and to come with a kindness and a willingness to really listen to each other and accept that we may not always agree, and that's okay. And
at the end of the day, YaYa, make the right decisions for the people, the majority of the people of Belize. Make the right decisions, and being strong enough as a political leader. Yeah, being strong enough to be able to say, having come to a decision that maybe where we were wasn't the right direction, or where we were wasn't the right place to be, and admit, hey, listen, we're going to listen to this. We need to... More grown-ups have to prevail. Grown-ups in the sense that you're thinking of everybody else and not your political messages, and the politics aspect of it. Belize has to prevail. Unfortunately, we were not seeing anything that's clear right now. But I'm still young enough to have this whole aspect of, okay, if you want it bad enough, you want to fix a situation bad enough, and you have the energy to do it, and want an energy, and you could, then you work for it. You actually get it done. So I'm thinking, so many other younger people, I believe, and everybody who's been in this process and who's on both sides, who may have very strong opinions on both sides, that somewhere or other Belize has to prevail, and the people of Belize have to prevail. That the importance of that cannot be forgotten, and that the best will come out of it. Yeah, probably in the next couple of years there'll be a lot of struggle one way or the other, in every way. But hopefully the two sides will be able to make decisions that will be in the best interest of the country and the people overall.
Indeed, only the people will save the people. Let me just quickly read some comments from our Facebook page, Crumb Television Facebook page. Elson Wade said the PS was Michael Hulse and later Everett Wade Sr. Raymond A.E. Isagiri said the 3 pillars in which they built their democracy is believable, just as relevant to them today as it ought to be for us. If only our political leaders had listened and applied. David Henderson said, good morning, watching. Letty Anderson said, watching from Chicago, listening, blessings. Robbie Robinson said, great and informative interview. And Eric Castillo said, good afternoon, Belize, listening, watching, and being informed. Thanks for sharing. ATL Shalom. Definitely, we'll have to wrap. Thanks so much, Anne, for being a part of our conversation this morning. We're so thankful for you, for your wisdom in your 20s to conduct that interview and represent us as Belizean people. Thank you so much. We're getting to know you, many of us now from this generation, and we're valuing your wisdom and your willingness to continue to share and to teach. So thank you so much, Anne Wade, for being our guest this morning. I definitely want to say JCR Zoo reminded me that 23 years ago on May 2nd that Belizean Henry Chi was murdered on the Humboldt Highway by Guatemalans when I believe it was a James bus was stopped 23 years ago, and to still remember that brother, his family, he was coming with his brother to Belize City to get coal seed to prepare for his wedding actually. And even though it's 23 years, as many of us know, that we still feel the pain when our loved ones are ripped away from us unexpectedly in such a horrific way. And to my knowledge, I don't believe the family was ever compensated in any way. And so to remember that brother's name, this show will be repeating at 5:30 this evening on Crumb Television. You can watch it at your convenience on Crumb Television Facebook page. We're not having a show, we're not having Sunday Review next Sunday because Crumb Television and Crumb Radio will be having their annual Mother's Day show. So we return on May 16th is when the next Sunday Review will be. And we'll have Dean Flowers from the union as our guest. For the rest of May, we'll be focusing on unionism. So the conversation that we had with Anne this morning has definitely set the stage for that conversation. And so before I sign off and thank those working behind the scenes, my Earth Strong will be this Friday, May 7th. I'll be 55 years old. I definitely want to acknowledge my parents, Jean Marin, who's currently in country, and Roque Marin, who lives in Belize, for choosing to have me, and my mother in particular for giving birth to me. Respect, Mom. I usually recognize people as Mom on their Earth Strong because our mothers could have made a different choice. So for choosing to give me birth, to my siblings that I was raised with, my 3 siblings, Beverly, Zenzele, Marilyn Mahogany, and Roxanne Mandisa Ngozi, and all my other siblings who I was not raised with. I want to thank you for being my blood family, my nieces, nephews, cousins, my extended family in Belize. I'm thankful to have been raised in Belize by Belizean parents, Belizean family, community members. Yes, May 7th, I'll be 55. Please just wish me happy Earth Strong. That's all I ask for my Earth Strong. Our Master Chief Operator this morning was Jada, and our Chief Engineer has been JC Arzu. Thank you so much, Belize, for continuing to support all Cremandala products. We're still looking for an advertiser for a 7:30 slot on WB Morning Vibes. Listen, that big slot, you know. We need one advertiser for a 7:30 time check on WB. You know, check with Creme Sales Manager Natalie McKenzie. Until 2 Sundays from now. Thanks again, Anne Wade. Enjoy the rest of your day, sister.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful day, Belize.
Guatemala, this time we don't figure. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time my name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the help on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation.